Hi, everyone. In today's video, we're going to talk about using CSVs as a data source in your Gavel workflows, and then also how that compares to things like a dropdown or a combo box, or even a single select and multi select. But we'll focus in on the differences between the dropdown and the combo box, as well as the CSV data source. So, when you're working with a CSV, there's a couple of different things that you just need to pay attention to. And I will highlight them as we kind of go along. But what I wanted to focus on first is what CSVs are generally used for. So, they're used for more static data that's not really going to change. So, for example, like country names in the world or states in America or county names in a particular, area, things like that. So, as you can see here, sort of courthouses and addresses and attorney names if they're all in a law firm and things that don't really change that you're going to use a lot. And it would just be easier if you didn't have to like copy paste it every time, things like that. So instead, you can just use a CSV file, and that can be used across all of your workflows in your account. So I'm going to just quickly show you what it looks like, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So when you're in your Gavel editor, so if we go back to our dashboard and that we find my one that I'm already working on, if you don't have one, you just create new workflow, and then you're going to be taken pretty much to where I am anyway. So this is what your editor looks like. So if you have your new workflow made, you can just give it a title. So we can call this like question types, for example. And then we're going to add a question. And in this case, we want to just check out what a CSV data source question looks like. So what it's going to do is allow you to give a question title. Let me just say something like, which country were you born in? And we're going to give it a variable as we normally do. And then I'm going to call it something like which country, or you could say like country of birth, be better. And then what you're doing here is you're instead of writing out the choices or copying and pasting the choices every time, you are going to use this particular information that repeats over and over again. You're actually going to be able to just choose from your list of CSVs that you have uploaded in your account, which I'll show you how to do, but you can just see that you can easily choose from this drop down menu style here between your different ones that you have in your template library, which I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. So when we run this now, this is what this looks like on the other side. We have our header here, question types. We have our question, which country were you born in, here. And then this is not shown to the end user. That's for internal purposes that you can keep track of on like a master variable list, for example, which mine looks like this. And then we didn't have to actually do anything except, so let's say we have like United States or United Kingdom, for example. Now you can see the different options that are coming up. This is kind of operating as a search bar, and then the different ones that have the appropriate or like the matching. Let me see if there's like Angola. Something like that, yeah. So like Angola, whatever you want, whatever is on the CSV file will show up depending on like the search that's coming up here. So that's how you can see what this CSV file looks like on the other side. And then what we'll go into is some of the things you need to pay attention to when you're using these. And then we're going to talk about the differences between other things like a dropdown or combo box, which are similar but not quite the same. So let's talk a little bit about when you're using a CSV data source, what you need to pay attention to. So when you're pulling from this, it allows you to do, as you saw, search for a row in a spreadsheet and have that available for use as one of the end users' inputs in your workflow. So when you create one, you need to make sure you have the CSV file uploaded to your account first, then you'll be able to use it in your questions. If you have, this is a good point here. If you have multiple builders on your account, you will share CSV files, meaning if you upload it on the same subdomain, then you're going to be able to see it across workflows. For example, if I go into my kind of demo builder account here, I can see the same CSV files uploaded as you can see in my kind of master or admin account here, which is if I upload something here, it's going to show up here for her as well. And that's really helpful if you're kind of passing workflows back and forth using this kind of send copy to builder function, because it's not going to disrupt any of your CSV files as long as you're sharing on the same subdomain like this. So if we go back to some of the different things we need to kind of look out for as we're kind of creating our CSV file to be mindful of so we don't hit errors, is that you need to make sure your spreadsheet has at least 2 columns. So when I first was trying CSV files, I was so frustrated because I only needed 1 column, which was going to be all states, for example. But if you don't have a second column, you're going to get an error. So we're going to go through what that looks like when you do it wrong, and then also what it looks like when you do it right. So let's just do something like all attorneys, and then it's gonna maybe let's just say there's like Brittany Hernandez, and this would be like let's say you have a lot of attorneys in your firm, and you don't want to have to kind of copy paste all of their names every time. You want to have the option to select which attorney is working on that case, for example. Then you can do it like via a CSV file instead. So let's say we have Brittany Hernandez, and then we have um, Bugsby Bunny, and we have um, Peppa. Is it Peppa Pig? Peppa Pig. Yeah, let's use Peppa Pig. Peppa Pig would be cute as well. So we have these, let's just say we have these 3 examples, and let's go ahead and download this as a CSV file. I'm just going to drop this on my desktop. I'm going to say something like all attorneys or something. And then let's go ahead and save this. I think this is the easiest way to save a CSV file instead of doing it from like Excel. I mean, that's easy too, but I just find this the most easy path and direct path to creating a CSV. So here you can see we have this 1 column of all attorneys. And if I try to download or upload this into my template library, it's going to return an error. So it's not going to let me because I don't have 2 columns. So if I go ahead and try to save this, I get this error that says, error, whoops, something went wrong. And the reason is, as we mentioned, you need to have 2 columns. So we don't have that right now. So let's go ahead and trash this one, and let's make one that has even just something that says a header that says blank. So that's a little workaround you can use to get around this particular requirement for having 2 columns. So it doesn't have to have any data in that column. It just needs to have something as a header. So let's go ahead and save this. And as you can see with our CSV files here, so I have 2 now. And I'm going to show you as well that it also adds to our second one. So you can make sure that you configure our different display columns. So the display columns are the ones that will be displayed to the user, taking the workflow for rows matching their input. We have a unique column, a column that contains unique values that's used internally to pull the latest data during document generation. And then you have searchable columns, which would be the columns to search for the text entered in a CSV question when taking a workflow. So you can take off this blank one because there's nothing actually in there. So we can just take that off. And then we have this last piece, which is actually really, really important, which is understanding this checkbox here, which is it's defaulted to the fact that CSV files are going to contain private data, which isn't always the case, but it's just generally that, like if it's a client list, for example, or people's addresses or their phone numbers or things like that. So if you are using this internally, it's okay that this is checked and it's going to protect people's private data. But if you have a public facing workflow or something that you give to people outside of your organization, then this is going to return an error. Not an error, it's just going to say that they're unauthorized to view that particular workflow. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you what that looks like first. So this says, so this data won't be used in public facing workflows and will only be available to logged in users taking this workflow. So let's go ahead and save this. And you can have different rules around logged in. So it can be logged in with this particular sort of domain name or whatever else. So now we have 3 different CSV files. If we look into our builder account over here, where as you saw before, we only had 2, we can see now that there's going to be 3. And the one that we just added also got added to our builder's account without us having to do anything else. So now our builder can use it in their workflows. And if we transfer any workflows to that builder, they will be able to see that as well. So if we go into our testing environment where we were before, but go into the editor side, so let's go ahead and edit this one. So we have this CSV file question here, and now we can see that the all attorneys one that we added is added to our list of options for a data source for this particular question. So we have which country were you born in, and then we can add another one that will be a CSV question as well, and we're going to use the all attorneys one. So which attorney will be working on this case? And then we can say like which attorney. And then what I want to show you here is what it looks like because we have an unchecked contains private data. So right now I'm logged in, and so I can see these questions fine. Which country were you born in? And then I can say like United States, America. Oops. And then I can say which attorney will be working on the case, and then I can say something like Peppa Pig. And so that's how easy that can be. Now, if we wanted to share this workflow with someone else who wasn't logged in, let's say, for example, I'm going to just show you what that would look like with the unauthorized message that comes to them so you can just see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and copy this link, and we're going to open it in an incognito tab. I always like to test my workflows in an incognito tab just so that I can see what it looks like to someone when it's kind of freshly loaded for them and they're not logged in. So now you can see this message unauthorized. You do not have access to this workflow. And the reason for this is the fact that the CSV file is containing private data. So we can edit that by saying edit. And we can go here and we can uncheck contains private data and save this now. Now, if we try again, now that this has been updated, and now we share this with someone else, let's just give it a second to load. Okay, so it just needed a second to refresh, but now you can see the question types, even if we just share the link to someone now that I've unchecked that contains private data box. So the next thing I'd like to do is show you the difference between different types of questions. So right now we have the CSV question, and I want to show you what this looks like compared to a drop-down menu as well as compared to a combo box, and you can kind of see why you would choose maybe one over another because there's some pretty key differences here. So let me just get out of a couple of tabs here. If we go back into our testing environment, we're going to delete one of these questions. Maybe let's delete the country one. So the country one might be a good example because it's quite long. So that might be the best one. So let's go ahead and do that one instead. So let's start with the drop down type of question. So drop down is really, really common. The great thing about it is that you can see all of the different it's very common in lots of different contexts. So people are used to interacting with a drop down, and you don't have to type anything. You can just find it from the list and then you're good to go. So let's use this example of like, which country were you born in? And then we can say country of birth. And then instead of let's say you were gonna like type them out, for example, you could do that, or you can find a list. So that you could say like list of countries in the world, for example. And then you could say, I think there's one that's like for drop down menu. Let's say we find this, obviously you'd want to just double check to make sure this one is accurate and two is formatted how you would want it to appear in, let's say, any output documents and so on. For example, I mentioned that specifically because this one has a format like this with some curly brackets. So just being aware of, don't just copy and paste it blindly, but in this particular example, I'm just going to show you for the purposes of this demonstration. So let's say you wanted to do a drop down question for which country were you born in, and you copy and paste this list into your drop down menu. So it looks like this, which was not that hard. It was very simple. So you can do it that way if you'd like. It's more about what it looks like on the other side and how people are interacting with it as an end user. So let's say, for example, if I wanted the same one, but I wanted it to be a combo box, I'm just going to say like drop down here so I can differentiate between these different variables. So I'm just going to copy this one or duplicate it using this button here. And now I have country of birth drop down 2. And instead of drop down, I'm going to say combo box. And I'm going to just change this question type by clicking combo box here. So now I have the same information. It's just going to be formatted differently. And then finally, we're going to use the CSV question, which I already have uploaded. I just showed you the like kind of attorneys list one. So actually so this one's actually going to be a slightly different process because we need the CSV data source one. So we wouldn't necessarily duplicate it in the same manner, but we could copy paste the question. So let's go ahead and drop in this question, and then we can just copy paste this variable and then change the last part to CSV. So like this. So which country were you born in? And then we have 3 different types. We're going to have drop down menu, combo box, and then for this one, we're going to have a CSV file with let's say the country list. So let's go ahead and save this. And we save this and then we run this, then we can see the different ways that these are presented to an end user. So we have the drop down menu, we have the combo box, and we have the CSV file. Let's see, like this. So you can see one, how we made it. So what the process was for making it. And then number 2, what it looks like to the end user when stacked next to each other. And then I'm going to show you also what it's like when you are creating a new workflow and you want the same type of question. So here we have, like I said, the drop down menu. So if we look at the drop down menu, this is a great option for, this type of information. So somebody can just quickly scroll and the difference here is they can see the whole list. Like in a combo box and a drop down, they can see the whole list at once like this pretty easily. If you use a CSV question, you could like see all the ones that start with an A first, or have an A in it, things like that. But if you don't put anything in, you don't see all of the different list. So you have to kind of know what you're looking for in a way. Like for example, this is just kind of a note to like be aware that like let's say somebody who's an end user, maybe they are from the United States of America, but they put in like US or like USA, then it's not going to come up, even though they're technically talking about the same thing, but they're not seeing how you've written it. But here you'd be able to see like, oh, this exact thing. So it just depends on like who's using it, who knows how it was formatted, for example, and so on. So that's just one quick note there. You can also see visually and on the screen how much space is taken up by a drop-down question. So for example, here, if we have the full list, it takes up this entire screen. So just noting that from an end user experience, whereas here with a drop-down or like a combo box, I mean, you can see the whole list, but it's a lot smaller. It doesn't take as much space on the screen. And then the least amount of space taken up is the CSV file, where you're just looking for one very specific thing, and it will only show what's very relevant to what was typed in. Now, the other piece of this is going to be why or when you'd want to use one over the other. And this kind of relates to how much input you want to have, or like how much flexibility around the question you want to have. So for example, I very specifically, let's say I have logic attached to some of the answers here or something, then you might not want to use a combo box, because the combo box allows someone to enter their own answer, which you don't have logic around, because they can have any type of input that they want. However, if you wanted to, instead of having sort of like an other option, and instead, let's say for example here, you didn't want to have, let's say that it wasn't on here, for example, maybe it was a country that wasn't recognized by the UN or whatever else. Let's say then you'd want to have like an other option, and then from a building standpoint, if somebody didn't show up on here for a drop down question, you have to say other, and then you'd have to create another one that you attach, another question block that you attach logic to, that says, okay, which one? So you could like write in your own input. But from a building standpoint and from an end user standpoint, instead of having these two blocks, you could just have this one that allows the person to enter their own answer. So that's a really powerful tool, the combo box, because it allows the person to either choose from this drop down or type in their own answer, because it's a combination of a text question and a drop down. And then if you look at the drop down, it's powerful if you have very tight, important logic attached to questions, because there's no way to enter your own answer unless you choose to have that kind of like other block sort of show up based on whether they chose other, for example. And then you have the CSV question, where you need to just be really aware that the person on the other side can't see unless they start to type. So it's a powerful tool from that perspective. You just need to know what it looks like and how people are going to be interacting with it, because they're having to kind of guess, if you're an end user who doesn't know what's in here, how it's formatted. But if it's like, let's say somebody who you've created this to be used by, like someone who knows what's in this CSV file and how it's formatted, then that also can be fine too. But it always doesn't have to be the case that the person knows. It's just a matter of what can the person see to determine how you, as the builder, have made this. Did you say United States? Did you say United States of America? Did you say USA? Did you say US? And then they're kind of just, going from there. So the other thing I was going to say is around the experience of building out in different workflows. So let's say, for example, you have this testing environment, and maybe let's even call this like testing environment 1. So in testing environment 1, we have these questions. And let's say we're working on another build, testing environment 2. One of the things is, obviously from a building perspective, it would be the easiest, let's say, if you were going to duplicate this workflow, because it was going to have similar questions. So you wouldn't have to, copy paste or whatever else, or recreate the same questions over again. But let's say you were deep in the middle of something you already had, something you were already working on, and then you wanted to add this question later. So let's do testing environment 2 and create that one. So now in this one, let's just say like welcome, and then you had some kind of, greeting, like greetings. um, but just the point being that this is a different workflow. And let's say you have like other questions going on, like what's your name? Um, let's say like what's your full name? And then you could say like full name and whatever else. So the point here being that this is this information is going to appear later context-wise than, whatever else. And we could move it around and obviously so many different things. But the point is I just want to show you if you are going to try to transfer this information, how easy is it to do that and like what are the steps between each type of question. So if we go back into our testing environment 1, now, let's say that we were going to have some of these same questions in this second workflow, such as the dropdown or the combo box. Let's just choose one. Then let's say we wanted to like add our question, and let's say it's the combo box, and it's going to be exactly the same, like the question and the um, answers are going to be the same. We could just open up both and copy and paste because you always want to use the same variables if you're going to have like the same exact kind of question, if it's asking the same thing, so that you can push information from one workflow to another. Also, you'd want to have like the answer choices, consistent across different workflows and so on. So you can do it like that. That's fine. But I just wanted to show you. So that's the way that you would do it for drop down or combo box. For the CSV question, you just simply choose from your library as well. So that is kind of how it works, is that we didn't have to copy and paste something from a different workflow. We always have our library available to us in any workflow because it's in our CSV files database here. So if I want to make this in another one or in another one or another one, I'm always going to be able to access my library that's here in this CSV file question. So I hope this has been a useful overview of the different types of question types that you can be using, which include things like this CSV as a data source, as well as the difference between sort of a combo box and a drop-down menu and what they look like all stacked together. So I will see you in the next video.